And Bill comes from Colorado Springs, but originally from Texas. And he just told me a story about how he got involved in turning. He was a woodworker. And let's wrap up conversations, please. Take your conversations out. So Bill was living in Corpus Christi at the time, and a good friend of his who was involved in the legalized cannabis movement wanted a wooden bong. And so he got a lathe and learned how to turn for that project. And I guess there was a lot of product testing along the way.
Not by me. Still not my thing.
Yeah. So and Bill, well, what he's doing demonstrating for us tonight is legs for these vessels that in the style of Rebecca DeGroot. And we were supposed to have Rebecca here last year, but she had some issues and had to bail out. And so Bill is going to show us how he makes these legs. And without further ado, Mr. Bill David.
We good? Oh, I'm on here. Duh. Okay. Hi everybody. Glad I finally got to make a Denver meeting. I've been wanting to, but weeknights and doing the 8 to 5 things hard sometimes. I'm not a professional demonstrator by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just going to do the best I can, so bear with me. And like I was telling Don, I hope I can keep my language at least in the PG-13 range because I work sales and that is just part of our vernacular. Let's see here. Where do we hit? Can we get the PowerPoint up? Okay. First off, I want to be very clear. I did not come up with this. This is Rebecca DeGroot's technique all the way across the board. I have never been to one of her demonstrations. She's from Houston, Upper Corpus, 4 hours difference. I never even made a chance to make it that far. Life is what it is. So pretty much everything that I am going to show you tonight. One, she's done a really, really, really amazing and educational demo for the Denton Turners on YouTube. Very easy to find. And I am going to do my best to not repeat what she teaches in that workshop because she's way better at it than I am. But where it's important, I'm going to say this. What I'm going to try to do is just show you what I learned along the way to make the project a little bit easier for yourself. Some tips and tricks and stuff like that. And obviously the basics of how it's done. Okay. Let's see here. Everything I know about doing this, I figured out by just studying pictures of her work, watching her demos online, and just playing around with the technique myself and just figuring out what works, figuring out what doesn't, sometimes the hard way, sometimes just looking at it and go, well, that's not going to work. So it's all just my own experience and figuring it out. So Rebecca anymore, I think she's moved. Okay, we're on 2 screens. So I think she's moved to this ladder leg style that's on the left, but I think she started out with a turned leg. I know she started out with turning her legs, and I think she has grown into cutting the legs and assembling them from there. If you'll notice, let's see if I got this. Okay, there we go. This cut leg style that's on the left there that she does has some asymmetrical kind of curves and graceful undulations to them that is just not accomplishable on the lathe. It's just and if I'm sure it is, but then there's a lot of carving away and sanding. It'd be a whole lot easier to cut it. So I'm pretty sure she's cutting those types. But tonight I'm going to show you how we actually do the turning style of her legs. The technique is pretty much the same, but you'll see and be able to piece it out from there. It's not all that complicated once you see it done one way. Has anybody seen Rebecca DeGroot's work before, pictures of her work or in? Yeah. Okay. So here's a couple pictures, and the next couple slides are just pictures of Rebecca's work with turned legs. From what I could tell, these were turned on a lathe and turned into her legged projects. So there's a couple, and here's a couple more. I have a couple of these pieces with me this evening for y'all to look at if y'all want to get up close and personal with them. And these two I did not bring with me. One, the glass on the left broke, and I am in the process of repairing it. And the one on the right is just a little cumbersome. It's just awkward and delicate. So I try to leave it on the shelf as much as possible. It is, yeah. Yeah, I'm from Corpus Christi, so my house was 2 blocks from the bay. So coral was easy to get a hold of. I getting into actually the project. I think saying plan your project in the beginning is probably, I think almost everybody in the room understands the importance of planning it out before you actually get to work. But and I'm going to show you how to figure out your angles. I'm going to show you how to figure out your lengths, but sketch it out at very least. If anybody is familiar with AutoCAD or any kind of drafting software, would be a huge help to get this, to get dialed into what you actually want it to be. All right. But if you don't, sketching is fine. It's not the end of the world. I mean, people sketch designs for thousands of years before we figured out the computer thing. So that it's absolutely doable. If you want to sketch it out, sketch it out. Do what, it's better to do it than not do it at all. I've learned from experience that if my project that I want to do is going to have 6 legs, I'm going to make 9 or 10, because some of them are going to be short, some of them are going to be thin, some of them are going to break in the turning process. Just always plan about 50% more blanks and more legs than you think you're going to need, because you're going to want to purge some of them out. Before it's all said and done, you're going to want to take some of that out because they're not going to quite line up with the rest. And there's been a couple projects like the one with coral that you were speaking about, where I turned the legs first, knowing what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted it to come out like, but it was, and I'm going to actually go back to that just a little bit. Having 3 joints on that leg and curling the way they do, I just was nervous about how the project was going to come out. And I had to make some design modifications on the base piece of mahogany that you see in the middle. My original plan was to have those legs peg into the side of that piece of mahogany. When I put it together, I did not know my angles, and I did not measure them right. And it turned out they needed to go down from the top. That design modification worked out better. I liked it. But definitely designing your leg out, knowing your angles and your lengths will go a long way to satisfaction. And here's how we're going to plan our project out. Obviously, that's what you're looking at there is just a quick example of an 8-inch bowl. That's all that is. I'm sure that we all make bowls that are perfectly half spherical with a perfect half-inch wall thickness all the way to the bottom. They all come out just like that, I know. But the idea on this is actually just the leg itself, which you can see there on the left. The little bits you see sticking off the bowl that are labeled hips, I'm going to show you some close-up pictures of hips later, but that is actually part of the bowl itself. Okay. So as we go through, we've designed that out. I blew up the leg. I bisect each angle from point to point, measure the angle, and start with that. From there, I just explode the leg, take it into its 3 component pieces. That's what I want it to be. I already know the angle, so I can just bank that information. Explode the leg and then realign the center line of each of the leg pieces. Here's the trick. Rotate every other piece 180 degrees. Rotate 180 degrees and stick it back together. There's your turn spindle. Sorcery. Right there, you can get your angles, your diameters, your lengths, everything's right there. It's ready to go. Fantastic. When it comes to applying your legs to your final piece, I mean, nothing says that they have to be evenly spaced in a 360 degrees divided by 6 or 4 or 3 or whatever number you want. They could be separated and split arrayed across. They could be even across, or you could even twist them like you can see in that last one in a splayed array. It could go any way you want. But 3 points make a plane. But getting 4 to touch ground, not impossible, just a little bit harder. That's all. When it comes to your wood selections, straight grain, hardwood pieces, don't do anything special. Don't do anything, don't, unless it's just something you're trying to use up because it's been sitting around the shop for years and you want to get out of your way. Scraps are great. But if you start using something like a figured grain or something with spalting, stuff like that, you're going to get grain misalignment because, like I was talking about, we're going to rotate every other piece 180 degrees, and they're not going to line back up. If you want to see that, it actually happened to me on this joint right here. So if y'all want to come up and take a closer look about what I'm talking about, you can see it. I was very excited to use, I think that was the second or third one I put together. And I was very excited to use that spalted Chechen. And then I went and glued it together. I'm like, well, that looks like garbage. So don't, things like zebra wood, Bacote, things like that. The joint is going to be more obvious once you glue it all together because the grain's not going to line up. So don't worry about it. Use maple, use oak, use red oak, use whatever you got. But if you get something like a grain mismatch, if you look at a lot of Rebecca DeGroot's work, she ebonizes or lacquers a lot of her stuff. The reason she does that, hides grain mismatch. And black goes with everything. It's a sleek look. It's a good look. I mean, I'm not saying it's an attractive approach, but it's also a great way to hide that grain mismatch. Let's see here. You don't want to use anything that's weak or fractured, damaged, something that's got some unique grain structure in it, because once you put something in the bowl or whatnot, you're going to be applying a lot of downward force because you're working on a lever. I mean, it's sticking out here, and now you're pushing a lot of weight, and it's going to cave in. So, if you've got any weak spots in your wood, your project's in the long run going to fail. It might last for a couple of years, and then you put a banana in the fruit bowl, and that's enough just to snap the leg. Well, there you go. So my advice, don't use exotics. Don't use anything weak or damaged or spalted or anything like that, because you're just going to lose that special quality of that piece of wood. What's that? Oh, sorry. I thought you had a question. You can see on this guy right here, it was the first legged thing I did because I needed to turn out a project in a hurry, and that's white-tailed deer antler. I just had sitting around in the wood shop. I like it. It gave it a kind of a bony thing, but there's no cuts and twists into it, right? But you don't have to use wood if you want to try antler. Who is doing the antler class next week, that might be a good way to use up some scraps. Splines. Getting ahead of myself here. Rebecca in her demonstration talks about using splines or dowels, and a few other techniques to actually create more of a mechanical joint than just something gluing these two surfaces together. I've tried the dowels, and I had a lot of problems with just blowout from the drill bit on the backside, and I decided it just wasn't even worth messing with too much. So I advocate for splines personally. As you can see right here, those little mushroom guys are from Rebecca. That didn't happen. And I would very, very strongly tell you to use 16th inch veneer material at the minimum. On this guy right here, I was using my fine flush trim saw to cut a nice thin kerf in there, and I put some very fine veneer, and it was fine as long as I handled it delicately. But one day I was just putting it on the shelf, and one of the legs just snapped right off because that veneer sheared itself. Don't use anything too thin. So go for 16th inch veneer. They sell it. I'm sure they sell it upstairs. I know they sell it at the other wood store that we probably don't speak about in this holy temple.
Are you gonna go through gluing that joint?
I am.
Okay.
I am. Yeah, absolutely. So any other questions? Good stopping point here. Curiosities?
It's okay to say.
I'm trying to respect the holy host. Yes, sir.
Just on the spindle slide, how is the asymmetry addressed?
I'm going to go through that. I'm going to show you how to do it. Is that okay? Okay. Yep, that is definitely something that I'm going to show you tonight. I promise. Hips. When you're doing a thin walled piece, if you're doing like a real thin walled bowl, you have to leave. There's got to be some place for a mortise for the tenon of the leg to go. What Rebecca does, and I've tried it a couple times, particularly on this little guy right here, you can take a look at yourself for those in the room, is she leaves a large bulk of wood on the turning and then comes back and carves that away and sands it smooth. So kind of labor intensive, but you get that continuity and that gracefulness of it. But if that's not your style, you can also add them. That's what I did on here. I just added some Paduke hips because I had already made the bowl and then gave up on a project and needed something to do with that very expensive piece of Texas ebony. So I'm like, well, what can I do with it? I'm going to add some hips. You can just add them on. You still have to have, all you're doing is putting another hole there and making a mortise and tenon. So you have a bigger piece of material to put another mortise and tenon. But you can absolutely do that. I kind of like the way it turned out. And it was a whole lot easier than carving away a whole bunch of ebony and then sanding that stuff smooth because it is cantankerous. Yep. Okay. Yeah. No, yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. Let me get a pencil so I can point to what I want to show. See the best way I can get to this guy. So if you can notice right along here, you can see where I carved away a lot of the material that was originally there and left a deeper spacing. And you also see it right here where I put the proboscis on this weird little creature. Don't ask me what this is. It's part of a bigger project I haven't finished yet. But on a different note, that is supposed to be, well, it's a airplane holder. I just left the airplane at home for travel. Any questions from the online group? Fantastic. I use a Dremel. I've got a Fordham too. It's just whatever you got, and then a lap. They've got a lap disc for that and buffing pads. Let's see here. So you can add on the hips. Joint diameter. The bigger the diameter, the better. I think we all understand a bigger glue surface is better than a small glue surface. Yeah. If you want to, if this picture on the top, that whole piece is maybe about 10 inches tall. So the diameter on that leg, it's somewhere around 1/4 of an inch dowel rod. I mean, how strong is the end grain of a 1/4 inch dowel rod when you stick it back together, even if you add a spline in? It's just not that strong. It really isn't. But when I started working on the lower one, the lower picture there, I still wanted to have that delicate, bony gracefulness. But I wanted to have stronger joints, so I made sure that I left a large swoop, and I'm going to show you how to do that this evening. But really, I mean, it goes back to I want it to do that. So that my leg at the end of the day, come on, where are we at? One more. Looks like this. And we're going to go through a couple of those. Again, I was talking about ebonizing earlier. Ebonizing will hide your splines. They'll hide your grain mismatch. They'll hide irregularities in the wood, stuff like that. And it's kind of a sleek look. It's if you like it, if pink is your color, paint it pink. Doesn't have to be black, paint it whatever you want it to be. Black goes with everything. You know, it's the little black dress ladies. Am I right? I mean, that's a thing, isn't it? The little black dress. Everybody's supposed to have one. I've got two. Well, they're little. They don't fit no more. But the natural leg is also kind of enjoyable. I haven't honestly, with the exception of one of my pieces, I haven't done any ebonizing except for that one. I like the natural wood nature of it. But if you get a bad grain mismatch, or you had to do a repair and you need to hide it, ebonize it. Why not? Okay, this was the hardest thing for me to learn. Coplanar. When you cut this leg and you lay it and you glue it back together and you lay it on the table, you want it to lay flat. Pardon this crude bit, but I don't like this Velcro. I just haven't made something different. When I lay this down on this table, I don't know if everybody can see it. If I put it together like that, it lays relatively flat. But if I glued it back together in this orientation, it's not laying flat, right? That is, can everybody see that? Or is everybody following along with me? If you don't glue these up or cut them and glue them in a coplanar fashion, they're going to be very, very weak once you start applying weight to your project. On this one leg, I was pointing out where the grain mismatch is. Can we get a camera over here? See if somebody, if not, I've got it up a close up right here. Can you see how it's not, they're not, this leg comes down over and then splays out? It's not very coplanar. Am I making sense to everybody? Okay, all right. Then let's go back to the PowerPoint. I'm always afraid that it's to me, I understand it, but I'm afraid I'm not communicating it well. When you start putting weight on this piece right here and you start pushing down, it's going to create a rotational force and that leg is going to be inclined to snap. So I'm going to show you how to deal with that problem here in just a second. But if you start doing this and you do your own way, figure out what you want to, that's fine. Don't care, it's your project. This is just something I've learned the hard way. Make sure that it lays flat on a table. Otherwise, it's going to be weak. Okay, a couple side notes about, not about how to do the projects, but a couple of little things about nature. All living things have a bilateral symmetry. We have 2 arms, 2 legs, 5 fingers on each hand. Centipedes, millipedes, all their legs go down one side, 2 sides of their body, and they're symmetrical left to right, correct? When you go to, if you're trying to make an organic form, keep in mind that it needs to be an even number on either side. It could be 6, it could be 8, it could be 2, it could be whatever you need it to be, but it was probably going to be an even number if it's going to be organic. Okay. And all joints in nature generally curl the same way, right? Your fingers don't curl backwards. Otherwise, you're going to encounter what's called uncanny valley. Uncanny valley came about through as we started building robots. When people looked at a robot that was almost human, but something was not right about it, the brain just rejects it. It doesn't like it, like having 6 fingers or 4. It doesn't, your brain is unsettled by it and rejects it as something that's abnormal. So just be aware of uncanny valley. Let's see here, back here. Other than that, I say that joints curl in the same direction, but I'm also going to go back and tell you, look at that joint in black. It doesn't curl in the same direction. It zigzags up and down. You can make it whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to go this way. Naturally, our joints curl. That looks foreign and alien to us because it doesn't curl in the same direction. But that's part of the beauty of it. So, what's that? You're right. Not always. You're right. So,
Like you would want all your legs to be semi-identical to that.
well, you want them to be symmetrical around, but you can do an go against the natural curl, just like the black one, the black leg there is. You can absolutely do that. But if you're going for something that looks natural and organic, curling in the same direction is pretty normal. With that, I think it's time to make some shavings. What do y'all say? Oh, if y'all want to know how to do her cut leg style, you can see she is just following the grain, cutting the shape she wants, gluing them together the same way we're going to glue ours together this evening. So if anybody was curious, let's see here. Let's get back to that. Okay. From there, did everybody, the presentation was emailed out, the handout was emailed, people got it? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I can just send you this PowerPoint. Okay. Yeah. And let me get this opened because obviously I didn't print out my own handout. Sorry, everybody, I should have had this ready. There we go. All right, all right. Now I can follow along with my own work. Fancy. All right. Back up here. Okay, so where did I put my spare? Oh, right there. To help make sure you keep coplanar cuts. Okay, let me get in front of your camera here. No worries. I'm going to let you get caught up. All right. To help keep your cuts coplanar while you have your square blank, whatever side you're working in, number them. This will make sense in a little bit, but just go ahead and do it while you're doing your blank preparation. I believe you were asking why I had 2 jaws on here instead of 4. This jaw set, it comes with 2. It is made to hold slightly irregularly square cuts or blanks. But what I really like about using these pin jaws, yes, they're designed to hold a blank so you center so you can drill a pin blank out. But they also give a lot of lengthy support. So when you're doing a tenon or you're doing a long spindle like this, It's got a lot of gripping support because down here, you're not going to have a whole lot once you remove the tailstock. I just like using pin jaws. You can use whatever you like. This just after going through 5 sets of jaws, figuring this process out, pin jaws are my favorite. Let's see here. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that so everybody can see. Great, fantastic. All right. Fantastic, and there. All right. Obviously, we're gonna turn our blank round. Okay. So. Beautiful. And everybody has used a storyboard before, right? Paint stir sticks, perfect fits for storyboard material. Let's see here. When I make my storyboards, I pretty much tip it. This is my tip. Right here, I only have a 3/4 inch diameter, a 1/2 inch diameter, 3/4 and a 1/2. And then this is my head stuck in HS. So. Has everybody used the wrench strip? We all understand how to do this. And what's that? Okay. For those who haven't. So all this is just a standard 3/4 inch wrench. I have taken this, right, the short toe of this wrench, and I have put it up to my grinder and I made this lower edge sharp. Okay, it's a great, you can put it on your CBN wheels. It's not going to mess them up if you have a good quality wrench. But once you've done that, if you put the long toe down and you feed it in to the work, it will cut to that diameter, slip in and stop. And you will have a perfect 3/4 inch tenon. There's no sorcery to it. In fact, here's a little bit smaller one, but a little bit more pronounced grind on the tooth. We see it there. That's fine. Okay, so right here, you have to see how it's ground away. You will get perfect diameters every time. So if you have trouble and you want to repeat 10 in diameters, just find a wrench of the right diameter. Nothing. What's that? You just so used to work on the car. Then you can't find where you put that one that you like. Yeah, that's what those are. Pawn shops, garage sales. I'm going to bring this diameter down just a little bit more, so bear with me. And then I'm going to remark it. Now, one of the things about doing that wrench method is you need to get pretty close to the diameter you want to be. So I want to make this one my 3/4 inch and that my 3/4 inch. So from here, let me drop my tool rest down just a smidge. From here, if I put this 3/4 inch stop, that is now 3/4 of an inch every time. Same there. Now, let's see here. I might be close enough. Again, like I said, you want to be pretty close to the diameter. That was close enough. Thank God. Well, whoop. Oh well, not a problem. I have an extra. There we go. Okay. So now I know that these are the diameters I want the thickest part of my leg. And these are the diameters I want the thinnest part of my leg. All I got to do now is connect the dots. And this line right here, that's the tip of my foot. That's all that is. That's all that line represents. So let's see who's gonna. What I typically do from here, because you're dealing with a long spindle, you're gonna lose some strength along the once you take it out from between centers. But there is a trick for that. If you start it's a great time to practice your skew. If the skew makes you nervous, practice your skew now. Come on. Give me just a second. All right. That up. Okay. Now, I was under the impression that all tailstocks did this. I did not learn until earlier from Don that that is not necessarily the case. In most cases, everybody's got a tailstock similar to this, right? Life Center. If you come through, you can pop out the center point. The bearings are still there. There's nothing that says you can't bring that up and set it inside your tailstock. And when it spins, it's still spinning and it's supported on the other end. It took me 2 years to learn that. So I feel it. Apparently, I still need to learn to tighten up my tailstock. There we go.
Now stay centered. From here, now we can turn it down a little. Actually, we still have quite a, now that we're looking at it, we still have a fair amount of material to haul off, right? Go back to your roughing gouge. And I know I want to get that to that diameter. Now I want to go down to this. I'm just connecting diameters, so I know what this diameter is going to be, and I know what this diameter right there is going to be. I'm just connecting them. Get close. I have a little bit there. There's that. No. Let me just a minute. Well, just this is like I was saying, this is a good time to come back and practice with your skew a little bit because one little piece of wood, it's easy to back yourself and support yourself in spindle stock. If you mess this up, it's a little piece of wood. You're not out anything major. Yeah, you might have to prep another blank. But if you get to the point where you don't have to spend quite so much time sanding, that's the goal, right? Who likes to sand? You're a liar. I saw that hand go up. Don't let me look bad, man. From there, I'll make sure that I'm up to date on my own notes.
There's no reason you couldn't put like another knee joint or knuckle joint along the length of that leg, is there?
You can put it as many as you want. Honestly, your major limitation is the longer your spindle gets, the more bow you're going to get as you're turning it. So that comes into a question of, well, how experimental do you want to get? Make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay. From here, it's not a perfect leg, but it will do for our wonderful purposes this evening. Okay. Do yourself a favor. Take yourself a piece of sheet of paper, stick it under your leg. Now, obviously, I mean, y'all seeing on the camera, I've got a little bit of rough spot right here. If you're a new turner or something doesn't go right, sandpaper's your friend. Let it help you. You can just come in here and let it help you with the final shaping of your project. In fact, let me get a better sandpaper. Let's go. No need to be crazy. Okay. One or two spots here I want to clean up. Now that I'm looking at them a little closer. I had one little line where the live center kind of created a drag right there. Not, and here we go. Now that was dumb. Don't, everybody says don't do that, and that's why you don't do it. Don't move your banjo with the lathe on. I should know better. I apologize, everybody. Putting this paper underneath your sanding area will collect sawdust, which you can later use in the joint as a matching joint compound, like wood putty. That it would, the color will already match the wood that you are working with. In fact, in my little leg kit, because I use it so much, I keep a little pea strainer. Just so I can filter out the large bits and collect the sawdust I want. Handy. You'll see here shortly why you want to do that, because when you start putting the spline in and things like that, you start to realize, oh, the spline gap's a little bit bigger, a little bit longer than I want. You want to fill it with something that matches. It's just handy. Okay, that gets us there. Okay. Yeah, let's get this out. That'll get us close enough on this leg for our purposes. So let's get it out of there. What did I do with my chuck key? There it is. Sorry. No. So annoying. That there. Okay. Can I see our working surface? So we good? Do I need to move? Okay. From there, you could start to approach this in several ways for the next step or so. Miter slide on your bandsaw to get the angle that you want. If you want a 50-degree angle, your cut angle is 25. Just like a picture frame, 45 degrees make 90, right? Here's how I figured out, if you don't have a miter sled for your bandsaw that's worth a darn, here's how you do it. Let's see here. Just a standard gel metal protractor. What I have here is just a board, couple magnets on it, and I just line that up, make sure I'm at 25 degrees, and this will fit. I'm registering face number 1 off the fence, and I've got this just registered to the best of my ability with my fingers up against the fence, so it's dead even. All right. Give me a little bit more room here. And so now when I put this up here, I know that I can hit 25 degrees. And I want to look at it and I'll say, okay, that is the width, the widest point of my diameter. You see it, everybody? So I'm going to come back at it with just a standard chisel, cheapy Harbor Freight chisel. And I'm going to set that chisel. I'm going to reverse here. Always cut from your tip to your tenon, because the length will be consistent if you start at the tip and go towards the tenon. If you start here, then this piece on this end is 1 3/4 inches, but on your next one, it's 1 7/8 inches. You're off by 1/8 of an inch. But if you start at the tip and measure consistently, it'll be the same. So I can look at this and go, I like that. Length right there. And these cheapy little clamps, whoever has a use for these little things. Another one. But you can. I'm just creating a positive stop for myself. And I can bring that chisel against the face of the protractor. Set it. Now I have a positive registration at 25 degrees. Okay. With that, I have found this cheapy little, I think I paid 15 for this on Amazon, maybe 12, Japanese pull saw. I have a positive registration and I can get to whatever angle is good for me. I'm trying to keep it visible for the camera. Can y'all see it? And I can, without much difficulty, and if I'm just being careful, catch that positive registration. This is the most awkward part. I won't lie. I was trying to make it sound easier than it is. But this little flush trim saw will cut through these things surprisingly quick. If you can get it to. Figuring out how to do the angles was my biggest challenge. So I came up with that, and at the time I didn't have a bandsaw. But then I got one. The first thing I did was get a miter sled for it to make this job easier. There we go. Okay. So now, because these are two cut ellipses from the same surface, they're going to match no matter how you flip them. So there you go. When you're doing multiple legs, I would immediately come back as soon as it's cut right now. This is joint number 1. Because when you got 10 legs laid out there and you start looking at it like which point went to which, they're not just not going to trust me. I got lost myself when I started doing it. From there, I'm going to switch to my bigger display here. Bring it to you right here. When you go to put these together, they're going to be very, very close. But one's gonna be a little bit bigger than the other because of the curve of the saw. When you glue it back together, you want to have the extra point sticking on the outside of the joint, not sticking down here. You want to line up on the bottom inside. So that when you glue it together, you can come back and just carve off that extra little bit. If you got it on the inside down here, it's much harder to get to. So, that being said, every wood turner's favorite CA glue. Little CA glue thick on one side, activator on the other, and line up by the bottom and bring them together. And as soon as you can, get them on a surface to make sure they are coplanar with all your other joints and laying flat on the table. I don't want to do this here because it's not a workbench. From there, a little, just to finish it off, give it a second. All right, now, who of you asking how do we, no, somebody online was, how do we deal with the, what's that? Base Ventura, here's how we're gonna deal with that. First off, we're okay now, we've glued it together. You can just come back and kind of eyeball down the middle. Okay? From there, when I started doing these, I was using this same flush cut trim saw, which creates an impossibly thin curve. And you're welcome. Sorry, it's a good habit. So we're okay. Oh, I didn't get a very good lineup on there, but no big deal. The kerf on this was not thick enough for a good veneer. But this cutoff wheel made by Dremel makes a 16th inch kerf. And they sell 16th inch veneer upstairs, I'm sure. And let's just bring this down a little bit. And I'm literally just very carefully up that game a little bit. Done. From there, I have a selection of veneers just sitting in my box looking for a purpose. And I just fiddle part around until I find one that will fit in there. And hopefully one of these does. There we go. And if I don't have one that will do the job, I just go find another piece and put it on the table saw and cut off a fresh one. That's exactly what I was just thinking. At least. Fantastic. Well, more protective material for y'all's equipment. Now, typically I would use wood glue for this, but for the shortness of and promptness of the demonstration, I'll just work the veneer in. So it's set. I'll give this just a few minutes. While we let that set up, everybody with me? Anybody have questions? Yeah.
I work in a batch situation. I'll turn all my legs, get them all lined up, get them measured up, make sure they're all, as close enough. And if one of them needs to be rejected, I'll turn around, turn another leg right then. And then I'll go through and do the cutting, and I try to keep them in line and mark them. Joint number 1, joint number 2, joint number 3, so that as the process goes along, I keep track of which piece goes to what, and then I'll spline them and glue them, let them sit overnight, continue on from where we're at.
But you do cut all joint 1 on all of them, and then glue all the joints on, and then spline all the joints on. And then step to joint. To the next joint.
Yeah, I'm with you. I will always cut all my joints at the same time because I'm clumsy. Y'all saw it. Look at me. This is the way life is for people like me. We're clumsy. Here's my thought process. If I started and I cut joint 1, glued it, splined it, and then went to cut joint 2, at somewhere in joint cut number 2 or joint cut number 3 of the same leg, I'd break off the joint number 1. So I just try to keep them in individual boxes or in a row or something, and I'll do all the cutting, all the splining, all the trimming, all the sanding.
I'd imagine that if you didn't, your miter box that you made, you couldn't do it with a leg sticking something. If you already glued joint number 1,
Yeah.
that's gonna be on the.
That gets to be a little bit cumbersome too. Yes, you're right. Okay, so from there, now I have that all done. And utility blade. And I just go on each side and I make a series of about 5 scores along the leg. And I'll come to the other side. Sometimes that's enough. I got off. Come back, score it again on the other side to break off the excess material. No finger cuts. You'll have the first aid handy. I've done emergency room visits for my son who cut himself with a utility blade. I'm sure I have at some point myself, but I'm going to blame it on my son. Right? From here, I can just come back with the utility blade and I can start to clean up any loose extra bits of spline sticking out or extra bit of wood finned over the top. Some of this glue is still a little tacky. Like me. So I start with that and then I just come through and I go through a series of sanding steps, up to the finish I want. And I kind of skipped past this because we only did one joint. Having these numbers, which was step number 1, when you go to make your second joint cut on one joint, you'll never notice it. You'll never notice it. When you go to make the next one, you know what face you were on when you made that cut. So you can repeat that coplanar facing. Or if you want to alternate it, you can switch over to the next odd number, 3. And you can cut it on the other side. But then you know you're not cutting the next one this way while this one else is cut that direction. Does that make sense? It's do it once or twice, you'll see exactly what I mean. Yeah. And if you get a weak joint, your leg will eventually fail. Because it's creating a rotational downward force that's going to cause it to naturally want to rip apart. On purpose? Sure. Yeah. I mean, I got an altimeter and like, I came out in like 14 kilojoules. That's a term, right? Kilojoule? No, I didn't really. I haven't done that, but I did learn when you look at this tallest one over here with the globe on it. If you come up here and look at it, it's one of the earlier ones I did, and I used this as the kerf, and just lightly brushing it on the edge of the shelf I was trying to put it away on, it just snapped the leg joint in half. I had to go cut it out and replace that spline. It's just not very strong. That being said, come on. Come try it. It's like, I've never tried it. It's just a practice piece. Let's try it. Come on.
You find that end-to-end range better? You said earlier you normally use wood glue.
Yes.
Is it stronger than CA glue that you're using there, do you think?
I think it is. The CA glue tends to be a little bit more brittle. But as far as wood glue goes, I think it's perfectly fine. Once I get the spline in there, I don't mind waiting overnight for it to glue proper. I'm only using super glue just for the demonstration this evening. I wouldn't normally. Yeah.
Open grain on that spline. Super glue is going to be stronger than your wood glue. Your wood glue is going to go into the capillaries of the wood and not bonds. Even with maple like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you're gluing face to face like this, he's right. In grain to in grain doesn't glue worth a toot.
Not bond together. Yeah.
But
this is actually creating a joint and then putting that spline in strengthens the joint because of the side grain that you're actually gluing up.
Correct. So super glue to do the faces together, wood glue for the spline. Because when you put the spline in there, you're doing side grain to side grain. All right. But you don't want to do super glue in the spline, but super glue in the face-to-face joint. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Why did you mark 2, 3, and 4?
I could have just put 1 and then just counted it myself. 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, I could have just marked 1, like put pink there and always cut with pink up. No. It's you want to cut with the same number facing up. All right. Because so now this joint is on a vertical 90-degree plane because number 1 is up. If I rotate it to number 2, now this plane is this way, not straight up and down. It's like this. So I always cut on joint number 1. Maybe it's a little bit of OCD for me to go, well, I put a 1. I might as well put a 2, a 3, and a 4. You probably don't really have to do that. It's just habit for me. But that way you're always cutting with the same side up. They would all be 90 degrees to the face. Theoretically. You're doing it by hand, so it's as well as you hold your hand as vertical. Okay. Now, how much they curl and get into everything really depends on, well, this is 50 degrees. If this one's 20, it's only curled 70 degrees. Right? And if the next one is 80, well, now it's curled 150 degrees. Thank you. So eventually, yes, it will curl back on itself once you've gone 360 degrees in your total angles. I mean, that's basic geometry. But so long as you don't exceed 360, it's not going to curl back onto itself. Right? You follow? Okay. Play around with it. I mean, there's some things I could tell you, but once you do it once or twice, you'll start to see it and go, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Typically, you're only getting 1 or 2 joints to give you the effect that you want.
Correct.
Your first joint is at the, well, I won't even call it a joint. First attachment is at the body and your angle of the drill hole, and then your angle coming down to the leg will change per creature.
Yeah. Let's
Go down, up, down, up, down.
Let's get back over to the PowerPoint and I'll pull a picture up. In fact, I've got a better picture right here. Where are you? You are here. Okay, so here's some multi-jointed legs. No way. Who wants to talk to you? There's there. Can I zoom? There we go. Okay, so looking at this first leg, you can actually see there's a joint right here behind this stem. There's a joint here and a joint here. Each of these legs have 3 joints. Is that making sense? Is that a little bit more illustrative? No. Yes, the total angle on those would be greater than 180, but it hasn't gone 360.
If you're trying to make it to where they're doing it all essentially one curve, is that where you always leave side one? But like on the antenna on there and on this other leg here, is that where you flip it from 1 to 3 to change that?
No, the only thing that will change the direction of the fold is the angle you're cutting. If you never ever, let me get over here. Okay. Where's our camera? Okay. If you start on one and you never rotate from one, the only thing that's going to change the angle is, are you cutting it this way versus this way versus this much versus this much, this much, or this much, or this much. I mean, you could cut it, that's 180 degrees. That's a straight line. If you cut 175, you can cut it from this corner to that corner, and that's still a joint. It's just a matter of, do you cut it this much, this much, this much, or are you cutting the same? If you're cutting it 10 degrees, is it 10 degrees this way, or is it 10 degrees this way? It's still 10 degrees. It's just in a clockwise or counterclockwise orientation. And that's what creates the imagery you were just looking at on the computer when you're looking at that antenna with the eyeball on it. Here, I'll get over to it.
Looks like a Z.
It is. It is. And
If you took it off and you laid it flat on a workbench, it's still going to
lay flat. Lay flat.
It's not going to stick up in the air one direction or the other.
Correct.
Right. One cuts the right hand, one cuts the left hand.
Correct. Exactly. You're
where-
right on the money, my friend.
And then at the point that the leg goes into the body, do you make a single diameter tenon? Or is it, these look like they could be tapered in, you got a tapered hole you're putting them in, or does it? You just try to do.
I try to do a straight tenon because you're going to get the best connection being straight on, and you will get, if you use a 3/4 inch wrench to make your tenon, you went straight down the line, and you drill a 3/4 inch hole, it's going to fit perfect every time. Yes, but you're right, you're talking about the tapered legs on this tall fella?
Yeah.
Yes, they look tapered, but if I were to pull one of those legs out, you'd see it was actually straight. It's just how I turned it. I wanted it to look like it tapered in, so that's how I made it. But the tenon is actually very straight.
So you can put like a little flare and a stop and a smaller tenon to give it a butt to held up against.
Correct. Yeah. What's that? Oh, I'm getting close to finished. All right. From there, come on, there we go. All right. So, be precise in all your steps. Storyboard, if you want to make consistent legs that, 3 or 6 or 8 that look alike, use a storyboard. Try to make your joints as big a diameter as possible to save your sawdust, because, and as we're finishing up, if somebody wants to come up and look at this joint on this leg, you can see where you might want to use some sawdust. It'll be kind of obvious. Cut from the tip towards the tenon as you're disassembling your leg from the spindle to into its cut pieces. When you're putting it all together, 3 points make a plane, right? I mean, no matter what, 3 points are always going to sit on a flat plane. But you could put 6 legs on something. In that case, I made it with 6 legs and I tried to make it look like it was actually crawling or walking. Didn't that one with the black legs, give it just 1 second. With 6 legs, it was really surprisingly really difficult to get all 6 of those legs to touch the ground. It was really hard. And in fact, if you look at 1 or 2 of them, they missed the bottom by about like a 1/16 of an inch. It's really hard to get 6 or 8 legs to all touch. Yeah. You had a question? I don't even mark them, honestly. I only put a pencil to it so y'all could see it on the camera. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You can, if that's what works for you. When I start putting it on that cutting board, or I put it on, this is my bandsaw sled, I will glue a block right here at the distance from the cut that I want it to be. And I'll put the first one, butt it up there, clamp it in, however orientation I'm trying to get it. I'll slide it up to here, clamp it on and cut it. But then I'll take this one out and put this one in and cut it, butt it up with a positive stop. Once that's done, I will take off my my stop block, readjust the angle to my next cut, and then I will come back and cut it that way and do the next one and do the next one. So I'm not marking them per se. Like I said, when I started doing the legs, I didn't have a bandsaw. So putting that chisel against the protractor, very, very deliberate and carefully, and just gave me a positive stop to, so that gave me the angle and gave me a groove, gave me a positive stop. Where I was having problems is being not proficient with hand sawing. I was cutting at this angle. I wasn't cutting up and down, despite my best efforts. It's a handsaw on a tiny little dowel that doesn't want to sit flat it's an irregularly shaped dowel. I mean, it's high points and low points, and it's not easy to make that cut perfectly perpendicular to the ground. So you do the best you can with what you got as you learn. But keeping that tenon on there made a huge, huge difference because it not only did it tell me a reference face of what do I want to have up when I'm making that cut, it also gave me something to clamp with that was square and steady. It made it so much easier. Oh, good question. Couple of accessory things that I had this from making water pipes. Have y'all seen the one-way drill wizard? So this is, if you want to do consistent holes at consistent angles and consistently spaced, this thing, I think I got this 9 years ago or something to that effect. This guy goes right in your banjo. You can adjust the height up and down as you see fit. You can adjust the angle. And then, let me lubricate it. It will move the drill in a set angle in and out. Okay. You combine that with an indexing system. Now, most lathes, especially, Jet, Powermatic, all those. Let's see here. I'll get that off in a second. This typically will go over your headstock, and you can set, well, I want 6 holes in here. I want 8 holes in here. You can move it, lock it down, drill the hole to the depth that you please, because it's got a depth stop on it. Pull it out, turn it off, rotate your headstock, the desired increment, lock it down, go again, pull out, and you can get evenly spaced holes at the same depth at consistent intervals to do this. Where y'all at? Okay. If you notice, I actually set this up for 8 incremental holes. I just ignored hole number 1 and hole number 4. So I had 3 on one side, 3 on another. Did it with this and an indexing system. This is made by One Way out of Canada, One Way lathes. I think I paid $120 for it 9 years ago. 90 years ago. There, if doing something like this is something you want to try to do, if you want to get into a point like I want to put 9 evenly spaced holes around the rim of a bowl at this weird angle, I cannot recommend the Drill Wizard enough. It's fantastic. My only major complaints with it is if you don't use it often enough, it gets a little gummy, so you need to lubricate it up. WD-40 will go a long way. And I wish they made it a little easier to set the angle, so you could know, I'd know I have this dead on 90 degrees, or I want to cock this hole to the left 15 degrees. You could do that. I wish that were a little easier, but other than that, it's fantastic. It's great. They're 160 on eBay. There you go. Sure looked well. It's not anymore because she just bought it, but she found one and was able to acquire it for 160. There you go. So yeah, so that's what that is. That's why I brought it. Whoever was asking about the drill. It is a wonderful piece of kit. It really is. It's great. If you ever get to a point where you've cut something and you've got some weird gaps that some wood putty's just not going to fill, art supply shops carry this stuff called Fix It, parts A and part B. I know several wood stores carry it in a tube type format. It's basically it's epoxy putty, and it just, do they? Well, there you go. It's a hard putty. Stands up nice, paints real nice. It's a handy little thing, little bit of stuff to have. Any other questions? You're welcome. I hope y'all learned something.